Welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Life Behind the Trig podcast with myself, Kyle Randalls, and my co-host Sinclair Patience. Sinclair, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, still on lockdown up north here, but things are looking at easing a little bit next week. So looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Yourself?
I've heard a few people saying that with the English government sort of relaxing the lockdown there's been more people flocking up north. Has that been the case or?
Definitely seen a wee bit of that. Yeah, there's lots of camper vans around, and some of the wee local villages are getting quite upset and putting their own signs up and things. But I'm kind of in the middle of Inverness, which is one of the cities in the north. So you don't really see too much of it here. I think it's more in the more remote areas you see that.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic that obviously no one could have predicted the severity of it. And obviously, everyone's training competition has been disrupted. And one of the things we're going to discuss today is how people are staying motivated and the struggle that's involved with trying to basically keep yourself, can we say, finely tuned?
Yeah, at a stretch.
I mean, I can say myself personally, I've managed to get 70 kilograms of weights together. So I've been doing a bit of lifting where I can just in the garden. But for example, yesterday it was absolutely slashing down with rain, so I couldn't really go out. The bar gets soaked and whatnot. And my garage, I don't really have enough space available just now to actually lift in there. Um, and in terms of getting more weight, I've resorted to slinging two 56-pound weights off the bar to add a bit of extra weight. Um, but yeah, I've been doing stuff that you could maybe classify as CrossFit, which is a little bit disconcerting.
How have you been finding it though? Like I know you've still been throwing once or twice a week. Do you think that style of training has affected your throwing at all? It's probably had a positive impact, has it?
I mean, to be brutally honest, for 2 months when this all started, I didn't really do much training at all in terms of throws. I did some drills, I swung a hammer in the back garden, but I didn't really do any actual throws. So for the last sort of 3 weeks, I've been going out every Thursday, and what I've basically said to myself is I'm going to treat it like a games. So I'll do say 5 to 10 throws with each event. So for example, the 28, I'll do some one turns, some two turns, and then I'm like figuratively slap myself and I say, right, we're in a games now, and I've got 3 throws to produce the best throw I can.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing just now. I mean, have you? I saw you were out throwing the other day.
Yeah, I've been doing a fair bit. I'm quite fortunate that I've got a home gym. So basically, the whole garage is set up as a gym. I've got a squat rack and I've got a lifting platform with an Olympic kind of setup as well. So for the last couple of months, really, like I said, my focus has predominantly been on trying to lose a bit of weight and get fitter. So I've not really been doing anything above 100 kilograms. Just barbell circuits for the most part. A wee bit heavier on some Olympic movements, but I'm feeling really kind of fresh for it. Dropped a little bit of weight, which I definitely needed to, but it's not negatively affected my throwing at all. So I've been out usually once or twice a week and throwing pretty well. So a wee bit frustrated that there's not going to be any games, but I think for me it's been quite a nice change because I've always been scared not to lift heavy, and it's probably at times had a negative impact on my throwing performances. It's been quite nice just to lighten the weights and get out and throw. I feel that I'm a bit more mobile as well. So yeah, throwing's going pretty well. It's just really strange not having a games. I mean that's the SHGA kind of published on their website just towards the end of last week that I think all of their member games are now cancelled. So for us, it's really looking like next May 2021 before we'll be throwing.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously spoke before about going to Waipu and competing in January. That's officially cancelled now as well. So
Is it?
yeah, I think you're right in what you're saying. With May possibly being the next time, we can even contemplate having a competition or a games. Um,
Yeah, which is a long way away. What was I suppose I mean from Scotland, New Zealand would be a fair trek. Is it a couple of flights?
Well, I mean, I go to KL most years, and that on its own is normally between 15 to 17 hours.
Jeez.
And my understanding is I think Australia is just another sort of 8 on top of that, depending on where you're going, obviously. Um,
Yeah,
but I think it's
yeah.
certainly more than a day's worth of sitting on a plane, which honestly terrifies me.
I was gonna say, how do you cope with travel? Because I mean, I can struggle at times, but you're 4 or 5 inches taller than me.
I mean, I
What
have
height are
this.
you? 6'5"?
I mean, it depends if I'm standing properly. No, I'd probably say I'm 6'4", 6'5", but I've got a
Three or four
technique I
inches.
like to use on planes. So what I'll do is, when the stewardess always walks up and down, because let's be honest, in the modern world, we're not all made of money. We don't all buy extra legroom all the time. So when the stewardess or the steward is walking up and down the plane, checking for folks' seatbelts, I get the biggest puppy dog eyes I can, and I try to make myself look absolutely massive. And I'll sit and look sort of crushed, and just stare at them. And quite often it does work. I will get upgraded. But I need to say, most of the long haul flights I've been on, bar one or two, they're normally a little bit quieter, and you can normally sort of move and sprawl out.
Yeah,
Without that, I'd definitely struggle.
yeah, it's tough. I hate traveling, especially on planes. I'm not a big fan of any kind of public transport. Like, I hate buses and trains. Um, for work, I have to travel a fair bit down to Edinburgh, which from Inverness is about 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours. But I'll always take the car. A lot of people like to get on the train and take the laptop to do a bit of work, but no, I'd much rather get myself down the road. One of the funniest things I've seen is the Venter brothers sat right next to each other, with a little guy stuck on the inside, all the way to California. But, but they like to sit together, share their little snacks, their Polish beef jerky and stuff.
I know we've mentioned this before, but see some of the absolute delicacies Lucas turns up at the games with that are all homemade.
Yeah,
Like, have you
yeah.
had his bread? That garlic bread he makes.
I've not. I've
Oh,
never had his bread.
oh, it's
Never.
beautiful. And then he'll pull salmon out. He's got full meals with him. Like, I'd probably easily say he's got one of the most professional approaches to the games in terms of food and food intake. Um,
Yeah, I remember. I mean, we had Scott Ryder on the last episode, but I remember Scott um, looking disgusted at some of us for what we'd eat before throwing. And it's probably something that we need to work on as our nutrition on games day, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's funny, I did put up a sort of poll on social media to get some just topics people wanted covered. And one of them that was asked was, what would you say is a good snack to consume during games, or like a nice little, meal to have? Do you have anything
Okay.
you swear by?
Not really. I mean, like I've kind of swayed from one side to another. Like the last wee while, I've been doing kind of lower carb, and I don't really like it, to be honest. I think it's really good for losing a bit of kind of unwanted weight, but for energy levels, I think I definitely operate better with carbohydrates. So maybe some sort of cereal bar, through the games, just with some water or an energy drink. I'll sometimes dilute like a can of Monster Energy or Red Bull Energy with water, half and half. That was a sort of in rugby we would always dilute Lucozade, just still Lucozade with water, half and half, and that tends to work pretty well. I think because it's got electrolytes and things in it, which kind of keep you going throughout the day. But I mean, I can't claim to be big on games day nutrition at the moment. Something I definitely need to work on. What about
Yeah,
you?
I mean, I've probably seen the last year or two I've started taking beef jerky with me to the games. I'm not sure if it does anything, but it's delicious. But on a standard day within my box, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, if you're a heavy in Scotland, you've got one of these toolboxes with the wheels, and you just take everything in it. I think it's like a rite of passage in becoming a heavy. You're not a real heavy until you've got one of these boxes. So
Yeah.
in my box, I've normally got about 4 litres of water, and I'll just dilute it with, like, I suppose you'd call it squash around the world.
Mm.
I tend to have a bottle of sort of Lucozade Original, like the fizzy stuff, and then I'll have my jerky and whatnot. And it's so hard not to fall into the traps of just having sugary snacks that just pick you up straight away. So they're normally present. I I wouldn't say I take the snack game too seriously in terms of nutritional value, but yeah, I'd probably say jerky's my go-to just now. Nice beef jerky.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's protein, isn't it? So it'll be slower release than, for example, a cereal bar. But a lot of the guys, like, you'll still, and we've all done it as well, but there's so many burger vans at the Highland Games that if you're stuck, you'll go and grab a burger, which again I don't imagine is the best for an afternoon of performance then. But we've definitely all done it.
The thing is, food like that's good for the soul. Maybe not the body, but it's good for the soul.
Yeah, no, definitely. When you're out training, Kyle, so obviously you're getting out a couple times a week. What are your sort of goals at the moment? Because if we're not competing for a whole year, how do you keep yourself motivated when you are throwing? I know you're taking 3 competitive throws at the end, but what are your goals for this season? Is it just to maintain, or do you want to hit training PBs, or what are you after?
I mean, in all honesty, in my head, I've sort of got the mentality of taking this as a rest year. Now, I don't mean this in terms of like, oh, I'm not going to do much. I mean, just not trying to do anything exceptional, get through the season without getting injured. I've got a few sort of goals in my head. So, in terms of my three competition throws, if you can call them that, I'm wanting to get like a 50-foot putt every session if I can, an 80-foot weight, at least 135 in the hammer. I've been throwing my 56 over branches, so it's kind of hard to judge that. But I've had on previous occasions, I've had the ever reliable Lucas Venter calibration, or the eye calibrate that a branch that we regularly throw over is 15 feet. So that's what I'm aiming for, just to clear that every session.
Yeah.
That's probably my basic goals just now. I'm not looking to go out and throw any massive PBs. You know, if I do, then great. And in terms of weightlifting, much like yourself, I'm hoping just to sort of switch focus and lose a little bit of weight just now. I did ironically try to get my bike all fixed up, so that came back to me last week. And myself and Amy, we got all the gear on. We're going to go out a cycle along the canal, which isn't far from me. And about a mile out, my chain snapped. And that was the end of that. So I've had to end up ordering a new chain, which has been delayed twice.
Well, it's better your chain snapping than your Achilles snapping.
Oh, that's for sure.
I know a lot of guys that just try and jump straight into like running when they're trying to lose weight, and when you're over 130 kilos, running's probably not the best thing to jump straight into. So my best man, a boy Lewis Niven, he played professional rugby and had a sort of string of injuries which led to him retiring. So in this lockdown, he's taken up cycling and he's been doing 20 miles every single day. So I think he's dropped about 2 stone in the last 2 months, which is about £30 in the last 2 months.
Wow.
And he's loving it. He's absolutely loving it. I think just because it's given him a new focus, you know, it's not too hard on the joints either.
Yeah, the one thing I've always found with cycling, right, is the cardiovascular toll isn't what stops me. It tends to be the sores, if you can call it that.
You need a proper pair of shorts.
Oh, I've had the padded shorts, a padded seat, and I tell you, I can get off a bike and I'm like, oh, you know, you just want a warm bath and a cuddle,
or a cold bath.
Aye, possibly, aye, but that's what I struggled with cycling, is the pain of getting off the seat, rather than the actual my legs or my lungs, or you know, it's
yeah.
What I've loved seeing, and I know people have been complaining about it on social media, I love seeing all these people trying to get fit, people doing things they wouldn't normally, like, there's no better time for it. And I mean, we said this previously, like, if MD is looking to start the games and sort of test it out, now's the time. You've got a year to train before the next games, almost to the day to day. You know, you've got a year to train if you were looking to have a go at it next year, so there's no better time.
No, loads of time, and we've said it previously, but we're pretty open. You know, people can get in touch with us, whether it be with you on Instagram or either of us on Facebook. More than happy to take any messages and give advice on how to get into the games. But speaking of the games, where do you think they'll be this time next year? I mean, do you think they'll just kind of resume as normal, or do you think there's still going to be some sort of social distancing? Like, we don't really know how Highland Games are going to look, or any sporting events, do we?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure we both shared that blind optimism that we'd maybe get a games in August or September, but that's been completely shattered. I'm not sure if you've seen the proposal for how schools are going to work when they go back in August, September. Farcical's probably the best word I can think of. Like desks with tape around them that are like inclusion
Yeah,
zones that you're not meant to enter. And I mean, if you're going to do that at the games, it's going to take away all the charm and the intimacy of the games. You know, it's all about the community spirit. And I don't know if the games would exist. I mean, I know there's people who said, "Oh, can we not put our games on and limit the crowd?" Like people don't realize the games run on crowd, like gate receipts. Money coming through the gate. That's how the games survive. It doesn't work if there's no one paying to watch.
yeah, exactly. Social distancing would be pretty tough at Highland Games, but another consideration is so you've got your community, you've got tourists. I think there'll be a lack of tourists, but then for us as athletes, uh, what do we do? Like, do we all use the same stone, for example? Does it need to be dipped in a bucket of disinfectant? Like, how do we run as athletes is another consideration.
I know.
Um,
I know there has been chat of doing some sort of virtual games, but I mean, I don't want to be the guy with the tinfoil hat on. But for example, if you talk about doing the stone or the caber, like that stone's been basically at someone else's face and neck, and it's going to be against yours. And
yeah,
it's perhaps not a case of us getting ill; it's maybe who we interact with or who we see. Um,
exactly. Yeah,
and I mean, the
yeah.
caber's literally sitting on your neck slash face whilst you're running. Um,
I know. Some people are so short sighted with this whole thing. I've seen so many people say, "Ah, it's all been blown out of proportion," and I'll be absolutely fine if I get it. I've got an immune system. Well, maybe it's not about you. Maybe you should think about other people. Not everything's about you. Sorry, it just annoys me sometimes when I see some of these posts, and I know of people that have unfortunately passed away, not necessarily purely because of the virus, but it's definitely caused complications. So, it's people need to realize that, and we all want, I think, to get back to normal, but it probably is going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, and I mean the problem is if you do it too quickly, they're saying we're going to get a second wave. And I mean, could you imagine if you put on a Highland Games, like say you've got Braemar, you've got 15, 20,000 there. That's just a breeding ground. Like people are sharing food and drink. They're in close proximity, sitting together. Like it's an absolute breeding ground. Um, as much as you want it to return, you probably want the masses to be safe. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of people were sort of ignorantly, oh, I can't believe you've cancelled them all. And I mean, I'll be honest, I was sort of like that to start with. Like, seeing February when it was being discussed that there might be no games, like I laughed at that. And then
Yeah,
here we are a few
yeah,
months later, and it's the reality that we've been faced with.
exactly. No, I was definitely the same. Sort of start of February to the end of February, we were still having big conferences and things at work, but um, yeah, we couldn't have seen this happening. But it gives everyone a chance to sort of relax a wee bit, spend some time with family, and I think again in terms of motivation, I'm not finding it too tough. I'm seeing it as a bit of an opportunity, just to keep taking over, work on weaknesses. I see some people are out screaming at implements every day, going for personal bests, and that's great, good to see, but not what I'm focusing on at the moment. It's I'd find it hard to stay motivated if I was going out and screaming at hammers and shots every day. You know, it's but maybe that's just because I'm older, Kyle.
Older and wiser.
What's that?
Older and wiser, yeah.
Don't think I've ever been called wise. Um,
But yeah,
so yeah,
I mean,
definitely a strange time.
people are going to approach the whole training thing differently, and this is, I mean, I'm going to guess that most throwers have never really been through anything like this, and all athletes in general. Like, can you imagine if you've been training for the Olympics this year and it basically gets yoinked away? Like, that must be one of the most demoralising things you could possibly face in your career as a sports person.
I know you're. I mean, for a lot of those athletes, they're working to a 4-year cycle, aren't they?
Yeah.
And if you're maybe hitting the end of your career and you've worked hard to peak for the 2020 Olympics, it's got to be a big blow, and not just for your performance, but there's other things to consider. Like, a lot of these athletes are funded. Will funding continue? If it does, there'll probably be some criteria on that. They'll maybe have to hit times or distances. So a lot of pressure on that level of athlete as well. I think what's been quite cool to see. You talked about the online sort of Highland Games, and I have seen the same with strongman. There's been a lot of controversy around, world record deadlifts. One of the guys I know pretty well, Luke Stokeman, just last week went for a world record log press, 230 kilograms, I think it was, and he wasn't far away from locking it out. And then his brother yesterday set a world record Atlas stone lift, Tom Stokeman. He's a giant of a guy, but they're just sort of 5-10 miles up the road from Inverness here, so I know the Stokeman brothers pretty well. But that's quite cool, that format, and they're getting massive numbers of views and sponsorship and everything. Obviously a bit of money coming in there too, so I think that's probably an example of an organisation which is doing things pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, an interesting thing, speaking of the Stoltmans, if you could get those boys to commit to doing a full 8-event games, what could you see them doing?
It just depends, doesn't it? I mean, so I was in Pleasanton, I can't remember the year, but they got Hafthor to come and throw the Braemar Stone. And I'm all right at the Braemar Stone, but definitely not one of the stronger throwers. But I still beat him pretty comfortably in the Braemar, which I was very surprised at, because I know Braemar is probably an event where a stronger guy can get by. But no, he struggled with that, yet his weight over the bar was obviously very impressive. So I think it depends on things like coordination. Can they pick up techniques quickly? With any strongmen coming in, some will take to it, others won't. I do think Tom Stokeman, I think he's 6'9", and I'm pretty confident he could throw the weight over the bar pretty high. Luke's done a session with me in the past, and he was doing about 15 foot first time out.
Wow, that's it's kind of humbling in a way. I don't know if this will make sense, but I'm imagining both of them could do the weight for height badly but well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's no technique. They're just grip and rip. But I think Tom could probably compete with Hafthor there. I mean, such long levers. It's not that he's just strong. He's kind of built for throwing, to be honest. If you got a hammer in his hands, he did a few months training, I'm pretty sure he'd throw that pretty far as well. Just the length of his levers. I didn't meet Kyle Lilly and Colin Dunbar were over in Scotland last year. What height is Colin? He looks pretty tall.
Colin, honestly, I mean, I've not memorised his bio, but I think he's like 6'9", 6'10". Like he's a big old lad.
Yeah.
And he's always got these like socks that are just like ankle socks that are pulled up as high as they can over his calves. That's all I could remember about him. And he's the literal definition of a hype man. Like, I've never seen someone get so excited to throw.
Yeah.
And then Kyle was I mean, honestly, both of them are good lads. Obviously, I didn't like Kyle coming over because the uniqueness of me being the only Kyle disappeared, which saddened me greatly. But the pair of them were good throwers. Like, I don't know if this sounds daft, but they very much fitted in terms of, having a laugh, competing. It's not just about coming over and, having a competition. It's about having a good time and enjoying yourself and making the most of your time here,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a big part of the games, isn't it? And it's probably what a lot of people coming in need to realise as well. That it's not all about the competition. You're spending a lot of time with each other. especially if you're doing a full season. You're if you count the hours, you're spending a good amount of time with these other athletes. So you need to be able to get on with people. You don't. It's not compulsory, but you're making it pretty tough for yourself if you don't get on with other people.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that's been brought up, I mean, in the media over the last few years, I mean, it's becoming more and more at the forefront in modern society, is to have women's events included in the games. There's obviously a big push for having lightweights and more recently in terms of having adaptive competitions, and by that I mean perhaps wounded throwers, um, amputees. So one individual that's been in touch with myself has been the Wounded Highlanders. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with them. And their description they have on their sort of Instagram is they're a band of brothers brought together by their love of competing together at Scottish Adaptive Highland Games. And they were saying to me about having them being included at all events, like opening the competitions. And I was just wondering what your take on that would be.
Yeah, I think obviously in the Highland Games in Scotland at the moment are open, but it would be pretty tough for if for example if someone's in a wheelchair, it's going to be pretty tough for them to come and be involved and throw the same implements that we do. So I'm definitely for inclusion in that respect. There's a lot of logistics that would go with that. I think you need to ensure predominantly that things are safe. I think that would be the biggest concern there. And then obviously just the logistics of the day as well. I think for a lot of our Highland Games, they're community run events and they're doing the best they can. So if we're going to expand and have different classes, have a women's class, have a lightweight class, have the adaptive athletes there, our games would need support in order to do that, and that would be support in planning, support on the day, support financially as well. So there's probably a good few considerations there. In the long term, I think it's definitely a positive, and we'd have a positive impact on the games. And I've also seen that kind of in my job as a rugby development manager. Rugby's going through the same sort of thing where there's been an introduction of girls and women's rugby, especially over the last 5 years, and a lot of the clubs massively benefit from that, and in some cases almost double membership. Because you've got obviously the athletes themselves, but also the increased interest from spectators. So
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem they would come across at the games is actually fitting it in. Like, for example, games in Scotland will run pretty much constantly from, say, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning to 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. And I think you're going to struggle to find any period of time where there's not something happening. And it's the problem of actually fitting in the time. And as I've said before, and I believe I mentioned previously, the year past at Inveraray Games, there was 23 people competing in the Open, and the games can't handle that. So what we were having to do is after one round, there was a marker going out. So for example, say the light putt, it was like 40 feet. If you didn't putt 40 foot in your first throw, you weren't getting another throw. And not only is that obviously not ideal for everyone that's competing, but you also, as a thrower, have to get one in without fouling, and you have to put an easy one in so you're not doing anything outlandish. So it's an extra stress on yourself that you don't want. But at the same time, there's no other way for the games to deal with this because it is an open competition. So it's one of these things that you really need to ask, how do we address this? And there's not really a right and there's not really a wrong answer.
yeah, no, not really. I mean, over in the States, they do it the right way. There are classes, things are managed, but they have more people involved, and it's not so much of a community event. At professional level, most Highland Games are invite. So should we go down that route? That takes away a wee bit of the uniqueness in Scotland, in that someone from any part of the world could come here, spend a summer and compete in whatever Highland Games they like, and I think there's a certain appeal to that, which we'd lose if we made the games invite only. Selfishly for us, probably be a good thing. You know, we couldn't complain. We'd probably be there
Yeah.
throwing, but there'd be a number of people who weren't in that equation. So I like the open format. Um, if if things are to get more inclusive, as I've said, and you touched on there as well, it definitely needs more thought and more planning. Um, we could probably assist with that, but we're not the ones who are going to be able to have an impact there, really. You know, that needs to happen at a governing body level and then at an individual games level as well. Um, with the classes in America, you know, at times they're throwing together, but often they're split up and thrown from different trigs and things. So another thing to think about is the size of the field and whether we can cope with that. Do we then need to start looking at a 2-day games, and what are the sort of financial implications of that, and also the people? You know, do we have enough people willing to commit that time? So, yeah, I mean, we could. I think we could start with some key events. I know Castle May Highland Games introduced both women's category and adaptive athletes, and got a good amount of publicity. And again, great to see. But for that to become the norm, there's probably a fair bit of work to be done.
The other thing is, you probably don't realise that. I know it's easy to say the SGA need to do this and whatnot, and to an extent they do, but there also needs to be a support there for them from
Yeah,
above, which is just, I mean, it's just not there. The Scottish government, the British government, I mean, how interested are they honestly in helping the Highland Games expand? Because as we've said, the games are run by local people from the local area, and you know, there's not some massive, you know, corporate entity there that's sitting rubbing their hands together. You know, it's just the local people. Like, for example, I'm sure you know Patricia Grant, who runs Tom
yeah,
and Till games.
yeah,
She was messaging me asking how I got on the other week, and she was saying that the average age in Tom and Till's 63, and they've been having quite a lot of visitors recently. And she said it's not exactly what you want with this going on. And you need to remember the committee of Tom and Till is made up from local people. And if the local the local area has an average age of 63, you can imagine how much the games would struggle getting more heat on them. And for small towns like that, there's perhaps not the manpower there to actually run all these events. And it's something that, as we've both said, it definitely has its place and needs to be included. But the case is how you do it.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, I think as athletes, we'd certainly like to see the inclusion of more classes. But again, it's just how it's done is the big question. And I think what would be a sensible decision would be to start with, you know, maybe 5 games which have the capacity and are able to offer those classes, and then just take things from there. Because the other side of it is that are there currently enough athletes to justify doing it? You know, as far as I know, at the moment, that there are no female athletes in Scotland who are fully committed to train for Highland Games, and that's probably because there's nowhere for them to compete in this country. So if we run 5, for example, and they're well attended, then okay, there's maybe a call to run more. But you know, you need to start somewhere, and that would probably be a good starting place.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said to yourself, and I said in the previous episodes, which I feel like I keep saying, there is a lot of games down here, especially, you know, with the hybrid sort of amateur games, the SAL stuff that we've previously discussed. They do have women's events. One
Okay.
of, I mean, there's no way for me to word this other than saying one of my biggest issues with the women's events, getting the same amount of games and perhaps, you know, attention as we do, is a lot of the women's competitors, right? And I'm not saying every single one, but a lot of them are just local people who have turned up and decided they were going to throw, or you know, they're women from the local rugby club or perhaps from a local gym, and that's fine. But they're not training the way we are all year round. Like, I mean, I train on average 5 days a week throughout the year. Obviously, during the season, you drop that down Can they people say they're honestly doing the same? Should they be entitled to the same amount of competitions just now? And obviously, I'm not painting that with a broad stroke and one big paintbrush. There are athletes that have previously competed in the games, and there are people who come up for a lot of Dougie Edmonds games, and those women are professional throwers. Like they're dedicated. They train in this, but I don't
Yeah.
feel like it's always fair to allow Joe Blogs to walk in off the games and just compete, and they should be sort of able to have the same showcase as someone who's training full time.
Yeah, again, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because there's no defined classes. So I've often had people say, can I come and do that? Yeah, you can, and you'll learn. But at the moment, we're not really classified as a sport quite yet. So if you're a 16-year-old coming up in Scotland and you decide to focus on Highland Games, which I wouldn't recommend. I think you'd be best to go to athletics or a different sport, football, rugby. But if you are coming up and you want to focus on Highland Games, I don't believe you can get support from Sport Scotland or the local institutes, which is basically supported strength and conditioning, because Highland Games isn't a recognised sport. Yet Sport Scotland will support the Scottish Highland Games Association with some money towards drug testing, which I think is very positive. We're not quite at the point of being able to be recognised as a sport, and until that happens, I think there is a wee bit of a barrier for us and for the sport in general to progress. But yeah, I know where you're coming from with people just turning up on the day and expecting the same sort of rights as what we would have as athletes. But yeah, I mean, there's no restriction on women at the moment turning up and competing with the men, because our Highland Games are open.
Yeah, I mean that's what they're labelled as. They're labelled as open, and I mean, you almost need to earn the ability and your right to come out and throw. Like, I was over in America in Florida in January, as I said, and they were running the women's events, and it was like a sort of elite class and east-west sort of competition. And it was so refreshing seeing, a normal games in America, and there's this elite level of competition in the women's events. Sometimes over here it literally is like the local rugby club come out, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it is. But I mean, to be crying out for having women's events all over the board when half the time there's actually only 1, 2, 3 throwers, it's not.
Yeah, you need to be able to justify a need for more events. So I think go with 5 or 6. They're well attended. If there's 10 dedicated athletes at each of those games, then okay, well maybe let's look at expanding this to 20 games throughout the season. I think that would be a good starting point. And again, we're pretty open to any comments. If there are any girls or women out there training hard for Highland Games, let us know, because it'd be great to have you on the podcast. So we're talking about the UK at the moment, because obviously things are different in America, and there are some pretty impressive performances from the female classes there.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. I mean, if you think I'm wrong, tell me. I'm not meaning this in a negative way. I mean, I've said here I think there is a place for it. I just think it needs to be, if they want the same playing field and the same attention, there needs to be the same commitment from, the throwers that want to be involved in that side of things.
Yeah. I think it's the same with so obviously lightweights is quite big throughout. Across the world now, there's some high level lightweight competitions, and we talked about Sandy Sutherland throwing 140 foot at 14 stone, and some of these guys are throwing really far. They're close to 80 or over 80 in the lightweight, throwing the hammers in the 130s. We've probably had some athletes, come up in Scotland that would be quite competitive lightweights. I mean, Jamie Dawkins, I think, when he was a bit younger, or maybe still has the world record in the light hammer, does he?
I think he does, yeah. The other one, Jamie Gunn, when Jamie's doing one of his incredible cuts, the opposite of my incredible bulk, Jamie can be under £200 in his day. And I know he'd certainly give a few of the records a go as well.
I think he could definitely cut down to it, couldn't he? Because he sits like 220, 225, which is, what, about 16 stone, is it?
I think so, yeah.
If all he needed to do was weigh in a morning or something, I'm sure he could cut down. Greg Walker's another guy that is consistent on our game circuit, and I think like is a lightweight. Like he wouldn't need to cut anything. I'm pretty sure he'd be about £200.
Yeah.
And again, they're probably not getting a huge amount of recognition because they're throwing in an open heavyweights class. They're consistent. Jamie's always there with the hammers, and Greg won Strathpeffer Highland Games a few years ago. They if there was a class for them, it's whether or not they'd want to compete or what. Those guys are competing reasonably well in the open class, but I'm sure we'd be right at the top of the class in the lightweights.
Yeah, I mean, I came through the under 25s with Greg, and I have to say, for the weight he has on him and his size, he's always performed incredibly well. And I've seen him throw 130 in the hammer or close to, and it just looks rather effortless, as does most of the stuff he does.
Yeah.
I've seen him run and have a good attempt at a number of cabers as well. So he's
Yeah,
certainly
he does.
he's certainly going to be able to put his hat in the mix if he was to get the opportunity to go and do more of the lightweight stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to send them the podcast. Greg, go and do the lightweight worlds.
That's it. Fully commit to it. Do it.
So, guys, for we're talking about Greg Walker. Greg's got a brother, Dale Walker, who also throws, and they're nephews of Stephen and Bruce Aitken. So, if you watch Greg and Dale throw, in some events, their techniques are very similar to Stephen and Bruce Aitken's, especially Greg with the hammer. If you watch Greg's hammer, it's quite a similar technique to Bruce.
Yeah, I think the Walker family must be one of the most involved in the games currently as well. If you think about it, the two brothers both compete in the heavies. Rachel, the sister, she also competes in the dance, and I believe the other sister, who I don't think I've met her, but I think she used to compete in the dance, and their father also is heavily involved with organising drum talkie games, so that they're certainly in the mix. They're giving back, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, definitely four active participants, and then, as you said, their dad is very active. I think he takes a big part in organising drum talkie. Yeah, I think he works or maybe runs the local distillery.
Yeah, I think you're certainly right there. The other thing, one thing we were going to end on for today is we were going to start asking this to any guest that's came on, and then it dawned on us that we've not asked each other. So I'm going to ask you, how do you think the games, the heavy events, and perhaps the games as a whole, has changed from when you started competing to now?
Bit
on the spot here, eh?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think when you're younger, you come to the games and you look at some of the athletes and think they're absolute monsters. They're massive and you could never get there. And as you start to get a bit older, you get to know them and you realize they're actually really nice guys and will sort of take you in and help you improve. And I don't think they mean to do that. I think that's just the way the games are. In terms of how they've changed, I don't think anything significantly changed. Certainly the prize money hasn't. The prize money's been the same for 30 years. But I wouldn't say in terms of the actual events that too much has changed. I mean, I've said before I would do the game circuit as a 5-year-old because I was being driven around with my dad, who was throwing at the time. So then it was more about, okay, what stalls are at the games, what shows are at the games. Now the focus is on what's going on within the field. But again, performance-wise, I think over the years there have been some massive throws in the heavyweights, and you still see that now. But there's not been a huge progression in records or anything really in Scotland. You know, a lot of records are still standing from like the 70s and 80s. Maybe not too many, but you know, if they're not there, it's by a couple of foot. It's not by 10 or 15 foot. So I don't think there's been a huge shift in anything. And that's partly what I like about the games. Also understanding that there's, you know, things might need to change slightly if they're gonna grow. But yeah, what about yourself? Have you seen
I mean,
a lot of change?
I've came from the sport, not from a background involved in the games. Obviously, like my dad was a football player. He played football at junior level. My mum did athletics when she was younger, so I was athletics, and through that I came into the games. And I have to say, I feel like, I don't know if I just didn't notice it when I was younger. I feel like the rise of the casual thrower, if you know what I mean by that, like people who are perhaps not training all the time, but will maybe do 5 to 10 games a year.
Yeah,
I feel like that's something that's reasonably common now, and you maybe have some of the retired throwers who'll come out and do a few games, and I like that. I feel like that's part of the spirit of the games as well. And I have to say that obviously the modern push for the whole equality, which is a good thing. Like I don't want anyone to take my comments earlier as being a negative thing. It definitely has its place in the games. It's just how you implement it.
yeah.
And I have to say that I think that could be a good thing in time. How's the game? I mean, it is a hard question to answer, right? From then to now, obviously, there's less games. I know games are getting more and more hurdles to jump through, so there's probably less games now than there was when both of us first started, which is the sad truth of the matter. But
Do you know one of the things on that? Like, so you watch these old clips of games, and they're throwing a hammer with no net.
yeah,
But
the judges
I'd love to
standing.
see I'd love to see the stats. Like have people been? And it's not. Look, I'm not saying it's a reason not to have a net. I think a net's a good thing. But what I do think is you should take the net down as soon as the hammer's finished, so people can actually see you throwing. But I'd like to see stats on have people been injured. Like I've never seen anyone being hit with a hammer. I would never want to either. And again, it's not an argument for not having a net, but some of these old videos you see, like, you can't believe it. They're literally throwing. I mean, Bill was throwing over 140 foot with no net. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, and then the judge is standing right next to them. But I'm a firm believer that the rise of health and safety has came about in the void of common sense. I think that's quite a strong quote that pretty accurately describes the current situation where, health and safety is everywhere. It's constantly on the rise, and it's just people nowadays just seem to lack common sense and how you do things, safely and simply.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a consideration for games, and still is even with nets. Like often, you'll see tug of war been put in some strange places, and it can affect you mentally as a thrower. People say, it's fine, you're never going to get near them. But there's something in the back of your head when you're swinging the hammer. And you can never throw well like that.
Yeah, you just think to yourself, what happens if I do throw a 20-foot world record in a hammer and I hit someone doing the tug of war?
Exactly. There's something niggling in the back of your head.
One of the things
Um,
I find distracting at times is in the Highland Games, especially in the heavy events, we get a lot of film crews, and quite often they don't understand where they can and can't stand. And I've had people asking me if they can put a camera behind me whilst I'm throwing the hammer and like throw over them. And when you're in training, you've got an open space, you can pull that off. But when you're in a competition, it's a completely different kettle.
yeah, I mean, as much as the games are open and friendly, I've seen a few tell the photographers where to go.
I mean, it has to be done sometimes, because it does affect you mentally, and you don't want to. I mean, the bottom line is you don't want to hurt or kill someone.
No, exactly, and it can be distracting. I've done a few of these TV shows, and the camera crews follow you, and you don't think it will affect you, but it can affect you. You'd won last year as well, didn't you?
Yeah,
Um,
that was being filmed over the space of a week. I'm not sure what exactly is happening with that yet, but if
yeah.
when it comes out,
Did
I'm
they
sure
they
we'll
followed
mention
you
it.
to Brumar? Did you think that had any impact on you?
I mean, there was like some slight commitments you were making throughout it, like maybe to an interview or just being mic'd up constantly. And I don't know what it was. See, being mic'd up when you're throwing a hammer and feeling the mic move, like it's
Yeah,
quite a weird. I mean, it's probably completely minor and shouldn't bother me, but it did. Um,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
certain events it didn't really bother me, like the putt. I'm gliding, you don't really notice it's there, but yeah, I mean, it can be a positive because obviously there's an extra pressure when you're being filmed, which you can use to your advantage or maybe not. But I've always sort of enjoyed it. Perhaps not all the time. Sometimes it's too intrusive, but for the overall, it can be a positive thing. And obviously, it highlights the games to more and more people, which is a way of giving back again.
yeah. Some of the best footage I've seen is I can't remember what the show was called, but BBC Alba, which is our Gaelic TV channel. So they came and filmed a series of like 6 games, which was on the Grampian circuit. But at no point were we ever mic'd up or anything. And they followed it right to Braemar, and there's some excellent footage. And I think it was quite well received. BBC Alba isn't a big channel, but I think it could be quite interesting. I know like ESPN used to film some of the Pleasanton and other events in America. I'd quite like to see that come back. I think it'd be quite cool, even if they just did a one-off to see how it was received. It'd be quite good to see some footage like that.
Am I right in saying that in the early thousands and maybe the 2010s was Eurosport not quite involved with filming Highland games, especially in Europe?
Yeah, I think Eurosport's done a bit, and more recently, some of the IHGF games have. I think it's called Oxygen or Oxygen Media or something. Um, so France is. I know like Brisbane in France, they always film the event, and on YouTube you can find some quite cool footage where they show every throw and give a distance as if you're watching athletics. It's quite good. But I think to sell it, you need to have it a bit more interactive than that. You maybe need to follow us throughout the week and the lead up to a competition or something. Because if people don't really know what they're watching, it could get quite boring. Just okay, so this is a light. Now we're going to throw the heavy hammer. It's the
Yeah,
same as the light hammer, but it's heavier.
yeah, it's perhaps not the most engaging, and if you don't understand why we're throwing it or what the weights are or what we're doing, then yeah, it's probably just look at those guys throwing things.
Exactly, and I think that's why crowd engagement is important as well. So we talked previously about having during the 56 for height, have someone go with a 56 and let the crowd feel the weight of it, so they get a bit of perspective on what's actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lines I always hear at the games, especially down this way from Alan Pettigrew, is that throwing the 56 weight for height is the equivalent of throwing a toddler over a double decker bus.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know
I
how many
suppose it's where
times
where's the toddler from though.
this
I've
is
seen
true.
some toddlers bigger than others.
Exactly. But there's loads of weird statements and little quirky things that you'll hear commentators saying at the games, and they seem to be all over the place. Um,
Yeah, commentator can make a games or break it. But if you have a good commentator kind of informing the spectators on what's happening, not just with the heavy events, it can make such a difference. And some will be really engaging and actually interview athletes and things throughout the day. So I think that can really help in terms of selling what we're doing, and it also lets the crowd pick a favourite as well.
yeah, I mean, there's always favourites, and I used to be the favourite with the stripy socks, but alas, that's no longer the case.
You used to be the favourite because of your flowing locks.
I mean, I don't think you've seen me just now, but I've actually shaved my napper.
You going for the
Um,
full lockdown look.
I have, yeah. I mean, as a man who's balding, I'd rather embrace it now than before it's too late.
You should go for the beard though.
I've got a tash just now, tash only.
Nice, nice. Um, I'm all right still. Touch wood. I'm okay at the moment.
You've got that thick head of hair. Look at your dad and then look at mine.
um, but yeah, no, I think it helps to have a good switched on commentator. Do you know who's actually very good? Is Pete Hart.
Yeah, but I mean, Pete's got that background knowledge in throwing. He's an incredibly witty, funny guy, and he's just he's got that funny nature. But yeah, I mean, Pete shares the knowledge and the jokes, which is a nice balance to strike, especially when you're commentating at the games.
Yeah, no, Pete's good, and someone else who I hear is very good, and it doesn't surprise me. And this is someone that came and fitted in very well in the Scottish game circuit. Is Bo Fay. Bo had an incredible knowledge of the games, so it doesn't surprise me that he's a good commentator.
Is that both for America? Aye.
Bo Fay America, yeah,
Eh,
that was a good one. Bo Fay where? So, folks in Scotland, Fay means from. So, Bo Fay America it was.
the best jokes are the simple ones. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll wrap this one up. This is one of our longer episodes we've done, and we'll probably be back next week with another episode. Hopefully, maybe get a guest on. I know Bruce Robb's been pretty keen to come on. So, Sinky, thanks for joining me. Thanks for those of you that have listened, and we'll hopefully catch you on the next one.
Cheers, Kyle. See ya.
Take it easy.